and welcome to Integrative Family Medicine's monthly community class series. We believe that healthcare can be done differently, and we are committed to giving back to our community. Our health-related classes are free to Integrative Life and Employee Health Plan members and open to the community. And tonight's class is how to plan outdoor adventures with kids with the fabulous Beth Hockman, who we're very excited to have as our speaker. Beth Hockman is a parent coach, educator, facilitator, TEDx speaker, homeschool mom, and she has been in the experiential education field for over 28 years. She holds a bachelor's degree in social psychology and a master's in experiential education from Minnesota State University. She has worked for various adventure education programs, including 18 years with Outward Bound in both the US and Africa. She is also one of the founders of Asheville TAASC, the American Adventure Service Corps, a youth-based nonprofit that combines the power of wilderness leadership and service learning into value-forming experiences for young people. Beth has worked as both a high school teacher and as an academic director. So without further ado, thank you for doing this class.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to just dive right in, and we'll have a chance at the end for questions because I love questions. So yeah, we're going to look at how do we plan an outdoor adventure with kids, because I think we can all agree on that getting our kids outside and unplugged is really the best for them. I'm going to look in particular through the lens of how do we keep our kids motivated, engaged while we're on the trail. So let's get started. The first thing that we want to be clear with for a successful adventure is what are our goals. So we know within outdoor adventure, it can vary, right? Your goal could just be like, I just want to unplug and sit around a campfire, to I want to push myself on the climb, to I just want to go see the sights of the national park. So here's a picture of some of the things that my husband and I have done with our kiddos. We love the outdoors, and as such, our kids get to love it too. So we kind of do a variety, but what's really important is we let them know ahead of time of what that's going to be like. Hey, we're going to go out for the weekend, and our goal is just to hang out in hammocks and campfires. So they know. Or we might say, we're going to go explore a part of the cave that we haven't explored yet. So you're going to need a good night's sleep because we're going to go hard. Or it might be, we're going to go to Yellowstone and just be tourists. Or we're going hard with the climbing, or just a fun day of rappelling. So the first thing I would say is also, if you're going with another family or your parenting partner, because you all may have different ideas. You may have had a hard day of work and be like, I just want to sleep in a hammock. And your partner's like, I want to see if these kids can do 20 miles. And then the kids feel it, and there's no clear direction, and then it kind of blows up. We've probably all been there. So the first thing is just really getting clear on what your goals are when you're heading out. Then the second thing I would recommend is being familiar with our basic human needs. As we know, our kids kind of live this without filters, right? So if they need rest, it's not like, oh, Mom, I appreciate everything you're trying to do for me, but I would like to, take a little nap. It's usually more in your face and dramatic, and then the whole trip blows up. So just being familiar with some of these human needs, because you can then create your adventure that meets these needs. And if we're meeting these needs, we're going to get more buy-in from our kids. In particular, I want to point out purpose, autonomy, creativity. We often, just through the dynamic of a parent-child relationship, aren't always utilizing those when we're planning an outdoor adventure trip. And so that's what we're going to dive into is look, how can we plan this outdoor adventure trip so we're really touching those needs? And the first one is being prepared. And I love this picture because this is when I have two girls, twin girls, they're 13, and they love the outdoors. Whew, thank goodness. We did during the second year of the pandemic, 2021, we went and did a pretty hardcore canoe trip in the Florida Everglades. My husband and I used to work for North Carolina Outward Bound, and we programmed down there. So we were able to access their canoes. And in the words of my girls at the end, they said, It was a little more of an outward bound course and a lot less of a family vacation, but it was still really great. And again, this is just being clear on the goals, because we said to them, like, there's going to be days that are really hard. Like we're paddling in the Everglades. The first night that we were there, we got in right at bug o'clock, and Quinn, who's very sensitive to bugs, poor thing, I think she counted over 300 bites. And so from then on, she's like, I will be ready at 4 o'clock because the bugs come at 5. And sure enough, in this picture, she was prepared and ready, and we weren't. We were still swimming, and we walked out at 5 o'clock and just got nailed. And she kind of watched and was like, aren't you all the former Outward Bound instructors? What's going on? So being prepared will help enhance the enjoyment factor for our kids, which is so important. We want them to love being in the outdoors. So let's look at that in a little more detail. How do we get prepared for an outdoor adventure? What I like to do is, as much as possible, empower our kids in the process, because these are not only skills for outdoor adventure, but they're also life skills. So instead of you checking the weather and figuring out the route and then telling them what they're going to do, involve them in it. Show them the weather apps. Like, if folks out there are outdoor adventure folks, you know those, everyone's got their favorite. It's funny, outdoor adventure folks, everyone's got their favorite weather app, and it can get a little heated as to what's the best weather app. Even in our family, we're divided. So we access 2 different weather apps. So we get on, we check the weather, we look at the routes, what specifics to those routes, because in being prepared, this is when I was saying, like, it's going to up the enjoyment factor for everyone that's there. So if we know, oh, we want to go to Sam's Knob, but at 3 o'clock, it's going to be 90 degrees. Well, then we'll get the kids super excited about an alpine start, and we'll drive out there in the dark. And isn't this so fun? And we're hiking with headlamps. And then we're up Sam's Knob, down Sam's Knob, eating ice cream in Asheville by like noon. And we've missed the heat. They've experienced kind of that alpine start and gotten them excited about it. So things to think about in being prepared: umbrellas are your best friend, not only for rain, but also sun. And kids get excited to have like their own little compactable umbrella that they use for their trail trips. Obviously, you're not going to use them in a lightning storm. Public service announcement. Just make sure we all are on that. Hydration is super important. And hey, this isn't just for the kids. Like, us adults can be really bad about hydration out there in the front country too. So just making sure. And if we're doing a big, if our goal is like a hardcore trip, the girls get super excited and they start hydrating days beforehand. Like, I got to be at peak hydration because we're going, this is a going hard one. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. So hydration is crucial. And then food and being prepared for food. And I'm going to go into a little more detail on the next slide about that. But what's good trail food? This isn't a time to try something new with your kids. Like, oh, I think they might like this fun little, chai, whatever bar. You want to go with food that you know that they're going to eat out there. And also pick, if you're going in the heat, it's hot today, so that's on my mind. But if you're going in the heat, like hydrating foods, bring the grapes, bring the apples. Sun protection, making sure everyone's good with that. The bug protection, like you saw in the first picture, we want to make sure that's like the quickest way for kids to hate the outdoors, is getting chomped up by the bugs. Making sure you've got the maps and the guidebooks. And we're going to go a little more into certain maps that you can utilize. And then compasses. Compasses are great to start teaching. Even if you're on a trail that you use all the time, start sharing these skill sets with them. So get a compass. I mean, you can get them for like $10. Start teaching them about a compass. And then it's really exciting for them to have their own compass, right? And then they get out there. Now, I know I'm saying this in the land of GPS and all those apps, and I'm slowly embracing those. I come from a pretty traditional background. And what I say to the kids that we teach and my own girls is, what happens if the phone dies, right? You want both skills. So I am embracing the apps and the GPS, and also saying, still be familiar with the compass. Everyone should know how to orient a map. And then proper gear, right? This is so crucial. So making sure the raincoats are packed, that they have sturdy shoes. And here's the thing, even our girls, they started carrying their own backpacks when they were about 4 or 5. So up till that point, we carried everything, but then we got these little backpacks and they would be so excited and they'd have their food in there and their raincoat, nothing too heavy, but I was also establishing the culture that as you get older and we go on bigger adventures, I won't be carrying anything that is yours. I'll be busy carrying my stuff. Make sure your phone is charged up and that's good to go. And then the most important thing that I think we forget a lot is leave word with a family or friend about your exact location and your time frame. Even if you're going out, if you're just we're so fortunate here in Asheville because we can go to the White Dot. Obviously, you just go and hike that and go home. But even if you're like, we're going to Sam's Knob for the day, just let folks know, hey, we're going to Sam's Knob. We're going to be back at this time. I'll just text you when we get into Asheville. That's just something that's so easy to do and can be really crucial in a time of safety. All right, so that's kind of a quick and dirty on items to support being prepared. And I would say goals and knowing the needs, this is going to be your next most important thing. As we all know, there's no bad weather, just bad gear. That's what they say. Okay. So the next one that I'm going to go on our checklist. This is a picture from us packing, if you can see here, from our 5-day TAASC, which is the wilderness nonprofit my husband and I run. We just got back from a 5-day up in Grayson Highlands. And the girls, Zoe, Quinn, Mom, Dad was on the back. We all have our own checklist of our meals. I love checklists. Just in general to get by day to day. And here's one of the main reasons why I love it is not only can we brain dump it and it keeps us on track, but when we cross things off, it produces dopamine, which is our pleasure neurotransmitter. And so it's going to keep us more invested, AKA our kids. So if we have a checklist for them and they're packing their backpacks and they're checking things off, it's getting them that much more excited for the trip as the dopamines keep coming. So what are some good checklists to use? I would say the main ones, and this is in when my girls were little, I started doing this, right? Like now they write up their checklist, but when they were little, I would write it up and I would hand it to them, like little 5-year-old Zoe and Quinn. And here's your checklist. Okay, at that age, it was pictorial because they didn't totally have the reading going on, which is fine. It can be a pictorial one. And I kind of created one for a day backpack so that I didn't have to recreate it. So you can just kind of go online, create it with the icons, and then you just have it. So every time you want to go, right, you want to streamline. I'm all about systems and efficiency. Because if you want to get up there into the Shining Rock Wilderness area, you got to get there before the crowds if you're going on the weekend, right? So you want to be like, here's your list. You got 10 minutes to pack up. And then they just know because it's their usual list, like water bottle, raincoat, trail bar. So one for food, one to put in your backpack. The food one is going to be more if you're on a multi-day trip. That's going to have its separate checklist. What to put in your backpack if you're doing a day adventure, the food can be on that checklist. And then a big one is what needs to be done before you leave. I always say to my girls, we like to come home to a clean house. So if we're going out for a week-long adventure, that's on the checklist. Like we clean the house and we give all the instructions to the dog sitter if the dogs aren't coming. And even though that's stuff that I'm overseeing, I still create that list so that my girls can see it and help me with it because they're getting at an age where I can just hand that off. For example, coming here, I'm solo parenting right now, coming here, I just made a little checkoff list, unload the dishwasher, vacuum the house, and kind of handed it to them. And they're so, I don't want to say well-trained because it makes it kind of like the dog trainer situation, but let's just say they embrace lists as much as I do. So I can just hand them the list and then I know I'll go home and it'll all be done. Big fan of lists. And again, I can't say this enough, right? We hear so many stories of like, whoa, I think they went to this area or that area. But And that's kind of a list. And I do this with the girls on our longer trips so they can start learning that, like put evacuation points. And this is probably going a little deeper into some more of like remote backcountry week long. But if you're doing that, not only are you letting folks know this is where we're going to be camping, you're also letting them know this is probably where an evacuation point is if there's an injury. And then you hand that, email it to a family or friend so they have that. And that's just that safety to keep us prepared, which is good stuff. Okay, maps. Yay! I love maps. Oh my goodness. Yes. And like real maps that you can touch, not just ones on your phone. So here's the thing, and getting back to those needs of having autonomy and purpose, navigators. That's what I say to my girls. You're the navigators for the day. And we get the map out. We look at the route before we leave. We look at it the night before. Like, this is what we're going to do. And they're getting to a point where I seem to be fixated on Sam's Knob, but it really is a great bang for your buck. It's beautiful, and there's so many other great trails that you can do around. But if we go, we can look at it on the map, and do you feel like adding another loop? What do you want to do? Should we come at it from a different route? And so we're all looking at the map and together planning what that route's going to be like. If it's collaborative, they're going to be engaged and bought in. I wouldn't like that as a 54-year-old being like, this is what we're doing. Get your hiking shoes on. No one's going to like that. So really utilizing those maps. And there are great ones to use. Like I said, I use both. I am a fan of all trails. So let's dive into those maps. I like the National Geographic. So this is their example. And these, I like them too because they're weatherproof, pretty indestructible. And they're just like $10 to $15 on Amazon. And you can get like Grayson Highlands, and you just go to Amazon and get the National Geographic Illustrated. I also like them too because they'll have the big and then a zoomed in area, which helps our kiddos and aging eyes. If you're not hiking with your glasses and you need to zoom in, that's a great one too. And then these are just some other examples. This is the Pisgah Map Company, which we use a lot at TAASC. There's also these USGS topo maps. If you're really into like getting into I love it. I love navigation out there. This is where you're going to get all the contour lines. I mean, you'll have some here as well, but these topo maps, they're the government. I don't know if folks know them, but they're the government issued maps left over from wartime. But they're great because you can just go online and you can order what quadrant you need and just make sure. This is what I always say, like, if you know you're hiking here, always make sure you get the quadrant above and to the side in case you hike off of it. That's more if you're doing off-trail stuff. The AT is like a highway. So if we're hiking on the AT, it's pretty straightforward. Follow the blaze. And then with the little kids, if you're just doing, and this is like starting, kind of getting them excited. So if you got a little peanut, if you're like, oh, 3 and 4, I'm so excited, we're going to go hiking, and you're just going 5 minutes from your house on one of the beautiful trails around here, do a hand-drawn map. Right? Just draw it out and get your kids really excited. And then, do the little symbols for where the water is. So then they're like, okay, we got to hike to the water. And then when we're there, we get, we're going to play in the water for 30 minutes. And, however you might do it. I worked with a friend once whose parents would go hide treasures ahead of time and then would mark it on the map. I think they were really fun parents, but I also was like, that is a brilliant way to keep your kids excited. And what they often did is they buried the treasures in the trees that had been hit by lightning and had this whole story about the power of the lightning and the fairies that lived there. And she's like, I just loved hiking. I just felt like so the first time she went hiking with friends and looked at a tree that was struck by lightning and didn't see it, it was kind of like, I need to go back and talk to my parents because I don't think something's right here. But that's what's so fun about these hand-drawn maps, right? Like, make it this really creative and playful experience for your kids. Not only is that a great time for you to connect with them, they're going to be in love with hiking if they know, like, oh, and then I get to the water. And they can start drawing maps. And then paper maps that you get at ranger stations. This is, like I said, we are just up at Grayson Highlands with a group. And this is from the Virginia Creeper Trail, if anyone's done that. So I just grabbed that map, and the girls loved it because the bridges were marked on it and they were counted down so they could know exactly where they were. So even a map like this is great for your kids. It just helps them know. And then when they're like, how much longer? This is the worst. You can say, check your map, right? It also takes that burden off of you. And then they'll be like, oh, you'll get that, but you've got the skills. There's the map. Check it out. And then, of course, the apps. These are some of our favorites. I've mostly worked with All Trails, but my husband's used the Avenza. He likes that a lot as well. You do have to pay. All Trails you pay for. It's not much, but that's really nice too, right? It's not one or the other. They should be together. So can you tell I like maps? Big fan of maps. All the different ways you can use maps with your kids. Love it. Okay, so like I said, we're going to dive a little deeper into food. And this is from that trip I did, Grayson Highlands. My husband and I run, as Ariana was saying, a wilderness nonprofit. And we had 13 middle school girls up in Grayson Highlands for the week. And they do their own food. As you can see, the freeze-dried stuff is really popular because it's easy to do. But food is everything out there, not just for morale and keeping our kids excited and engaged, but safety. And, it's interesting with middle school girls because food kind of takes on a different thing. Like, you got to eat before you're hungry, right? It's like a fire. We don't wait for the fire to burn out and then put logs on it. And so it can be a different mindset for them. So these are my thoughts on food. You should never be packing it without your kids involved, right? You want your kids involved because you don't want to get out on the trail and then they're like, I can't believe you packed cheese sticks and apples, right? If they're miserable on the trail, they're going to find everything to like nitpick. We've all been there, right? We've all been like, but at home, you love the animal crackers. Why don't you love them here? So and it's just like responsibility and lifelong skills. So be like, we're going hiking. We're probably going to be out there for 4 or 5 hours. What meals do you think we need? Oh, yeah, lunch and snack. Great thinking. What do you want to pack? So you're getting them involved. You're giving them ownership on it. And then depending on what age, my girls are 13, they pack their own food. And look, if they pack their own food and they're out there and they're like, oh, I should have packed more, or, if they were grumpy in the morning and they're like, I'll be fine with a bagel. They can handle it. On a day hike, that's what I love about day hikes. Like, yeah, it's going to be kind of sucky to be hungry, but you're going to live. And then the next day, you're probably going to pack some pretty good food. I mean, the next time we hike. The other thing that can be fun, and this goes for all ages, I have my special go-to trail treat, but to have a treat that's really just for the trail or for canoeing, whatever you're doing, paddling, canoeing, hiking. And so like we make these energy bites that are, I'm sure you all do it, but the peanut butter and the oats, and they put their stuff in, and it's really just their trail food. We don't do it any other time. So then when we're like, oh, we're going hiking, let's make energy bites. Yay. And they're great too, because it's all healthy food, high protein, which brings me to teach about trail nutrition. That's really important because food out there is a safety issue. And I've seen kids show up on our TAASC programs and I'll be like, it's time for lunch. They're like, no, I know I'm eating lunch. I'm like, it's a jar of Nutella with a spoon. They're like, yeah, that's my lunch. You know what I mean? And you're like, that's not lunch. That's not even dessert on a good day, right? Like, no. So just realizing that we've got, because I'm sure the parent, bless their hearts, were like, this seems great. Like, you'll eat it and it's in a plastic jar. That's awesome. And they're spooning Nutella. I actually did have one kid goes, okay, well, my other lunch is cotton candy. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's going to be a long weekend. Yeah. So, but the kids are so great. They shared, because eventually kids will realize that Nutella and cotton candy aren't good lunches. So you got to teach trail nutrition and say, this is when we're on the trail, we're burning more calories. We're needing, more protein than we might need at home. We're wanting rehydrating foods, and that kind of stuff. And then I talked about this a little bit. Let them be sufficient with their food. Let them carry their snacks. And you know what? There's going to be, like, we had one kid on our course who ate all their snacks in the first 2 days. And then she's like, oh my gosh, I still have like 4 more days and I don't have snacks. And I'm like, yeah, I hope those lunches and breakfasts are solid, right? And then next trip, not much better, but eventually she put it together and could manage that. But they're not going to learn that if we're doing that for them. They're just not. So, okay, if your kid's 3, I'm talking 13-year-olds. If your kid's 3, like, you're going to help them manage that, right? Because, I mean, a 3-year-old's going to be like, this is the best thing ever. I'm managing my own snacks all at once. And then this is, I kind of talked about this out there. Let them know, like, that's the example I use with my girls. Like, when we're out there, we're a fire. And just like our campfires, we put we keep the logs on so that they know, like, oh, I should eat before I'm super hungry. So that is food. Okay, we're gonna get to some of the fun stuff. The other thing which I was talking about is a human need that we sometimes forget when we're out on the trail, and that is creativity and play. And so these are just some examples. Like I said, my girls are 13 now, but just being out on the trail, like being out on the trail and getting to an open bald and being like, we're gonna just look at clouds and make shapes and play sky high. And that is our goal, to hike up there and do that and come back home. And that's awesome. That's a great outdoor adventure day. And just making sure that your hike, especially when they're little, leaves a ton of time for them to be like, what's that bright, shiny object, right? Where you don't want to be like, hike, hike, hike. And then, yes, what is that? Let's explore it. Let's take a look at it. So let's go a little deeper into some ideas. And this is some of the fun stuff for play and creativity out on the trail. And again, this is, can be adapted to whatever age your kiddos are. But having a goal for the hike can be really great. Packing one of those little kites and being like, once we get up there to Max Patch, we're going to fly our kite. Yay. And so then that makes that, that's a pretty easy hike. But if you got 3-year-olds, it's not totally easy. But they can't wait, right? Because they can't wait to get up there and chatting about on the hike up about the winds and where do you think it'll be best to do the kite. The next thing you know, they're on Max Patch. Then the other is trail questions. I love hiking with kids because it's such a great time to have that uninterrupted connection. And so just asking them all kinds of fun questions. You can go on Amazon and Google it. There's tons of decks on that. They've even got little travel ones that you can take with you, and you're just asking questions and getting to know your kids or your friends' kids if you're hiking with friends. Then another one for creativity is trail collage, forest bathing. But my girls love this. So what you do is a certain section of the trail, you hike it in silence. That's kind of the forest bathing part of it, which I know with some kids that can be really hard. So, you make the section dependent on how much you think they can be quiet. And you'll say, pick 5 items from the forest floor that speak to you. And then after everyone walks that section in silence, you kind of circle up in an open area, or if the trail's a little wider, and each person takes a turn putting down one of the items that they chose. And then you end up with this beautiful trail collage that has been created in silence and collaborative, which is, it's pretty cool. Every kid I've done it with loves it. If you can, any kind of hike that takes you to water when you've got kids. Kids love water, whether it's just splashing, teaching them how to skip rocks, whatever it is. Especially when you're trying to get them first interested into it, water is a good one to do that. Just taking time, like I said, we're going to hike and then we're going to take 30 minutes to make primitive shelters, den building. You can kind of talk about the animals or whatever it might be. And they love that. And then I always do say, because we practice the low impact, leave no trace, that after they've made their shelters, to then take them apart and spread them out. It's your public service announcement for the night. Sea glass hunting, the beach is fun. When my girls were little, I'm from Michigan, they were so focused, like these little 3-year-olds were so focused on finding a Petoskey rock. And I do have to come clean. They never found one. So I did buy one in the gift shop and then put it on the beach so they could find it. That's okay to do. I didn't get one of the ones that was like super shiny. I wasn't going to fake it that much. But I got one of the ones that hadn't been shined yet. And they were like, we found one. And I was like, so clever. That's awesome. Trail bingo is fun too. You can get those cards. You can just Google them. People have them out there and you can just download them. And collecting flowers so that you can come back and make pressed flowers. Taking time out there to do journal activities is great. And then having a book. When the girls were little, we had a little adventure book that we read only when we were out on trail. So they get really excited. They're like, we're going hiking. Does that mean we can read our book? I'm like, yes, we can. And it was really nice to just like cuddle up in the leaves. Yes, I cuddle up in the leaves and the logs and read the chapter book with the kids. So that's play and creativity. And this really is a powerful way when I talk about how do we keep our kids engaged and motivated while out on these outdoor adventures. Okay, the other fun human need, which is very similar to play and creativity, is fun and belonging. And this was from that canoe trip that we did in the Everglades with this is my husband, and then these were folks that we worked with at Outward Bound. So we all got back together, and it was awesome. So, and again, this is very similar to that fun and creativity, but they are two very important human needs. And if we can meet these needs while doing outdoor adventures with our kids, they're going to love it even more. So these are just an initial list I have for fun and belonging. Geocaching, if folks don't know about that, that is really exciting for kids because, again, they're finding the box. And when they open the box, right, there's little prezzies in there, and often you're supposed to take a prezzie and put it in and take one out. And this is, again, you're using your phone. But if you don't know it, just Google it and people can walk you through it and then you can get hooked up. And geocache, foraging, that's super fun to do. We're getting close to wild blueberry season here. I'm not going to tell you where all the good spots are, but I do take my girls. We go get wild blueberries, so that's great. Stargazing, right? So if it's camping or you're doing overnight, really like ahead of time, start looking at constellations and learning the stories about it. So when you get out there, they're excited to look and they already know the stories, and just taking that time. And it's even better if there's a meteor shower, so you can get out there. And usually those happen a little late at night, though. So if you value your sleep, maybe just stargaze, not do the meteor shower. Invite a friend or like a kiddo's friend or another family to go out and do that adventure with. It really meets that human need for belonging and community. And this is for the younger kiddos, for the parents out there that are wanting to get their little peanuts out there, is having them bring one of their favorite, we call them stuffies and friends. They were interchangeable, whatever the name is for their little stuffed animal friend. But they would love to take them out there, and then they would put them on this adventure and take pictures of them. And then when we would get home, we'd have a little book that they would make. You just, micro whatever. And then we'd print it out, and they would be so excited because they have this little book of their stuffy friend that went on this great adventure with them. This also can be fun. Give your family an adventure name and an adventure motto, right? So like when you're out there, you're like, here we come. We haven't done that in a while. I can't remember what ours were, but when they were little, we definitely had it. They loved it. Hammocks. Nothing more needs to be said for that. One hike, right, when I talked about goals, we were like, okay, we're going to spend the day outside as a family. What's our goal? And it just worked out that everybody in the family was to find a really nice place and lie in hammocks. And I was like, yes. And that's all we did. I think we hiked maybe a total of 4 miles that day and probably spent 3 hours in a hammock. It was awesome. And that's great because you're outside. They're not plugged in, right? Like you're off. Those are great. Campfires are fun. That would be, more overnight. They love walkie-talkies, so that's really fun. And then it's nice too because if they want to run ahead, you're not as nervous, and then you can kind of play like go off trail where there's no poison ivy. It's poison ivy's time now, but play hide and seek, and then we're going to find each other with the walkie-talkies. And then bringing, especially if it's colder, we took the girls on a winter hike up Bear Wallow, and we brought a camp stove. And when we got to the top of Bear Wallow, we made cups of hot chocolate. And they just thought it was so, between the ice on the trail and drinking their little hot chocolate on the top of Bear Wallow, they just thought that was awesome. Scavenger hunts. And again, you don't have to be that creative to come up with this. It's all online. You can just Google like trail scavenger hunts, and they'll have that out there. And then just really reading about the area ahead of time. What are any legends or, specific, like, are we looking for the hellbender? Whatever might be interesting about that area that really can capture their imagination. So fun and belonging. Invite some friends and get out there and do that stuff. I'll join anyone for a hammock hike. Okay. So reflection, again, this is this was our trip in the Everglades. And of course, a bunch of Outward Bound instructors, we were reflecting even on our time off. Let's circle up and reflect. Oh my God, I'm so excited. That's awesome. So here we were with our watercolors reflecting, because that's what we do. But look, here's the thing about reflection. We live in a world that's busy, 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 and we don't take that time for intentional reflection. And for me, the magic lies in that reflection, especially if we can teach that skill to our kids. Because right now our kids are overscheduled, and all the messaging from schools and sports teams and, musical instruments, practice more, do more, be more. And it's like, or just don't be for a little bit. And let's just kind of think about what that experience was, right? We're experience rich and reflection poor. So yes, this is funny because that's what Outward Bound instructors do, even on their personal trip. But it's so powerful, and another way to really keep our kids engaged in the outdoors. So what are ways to reflect? I'm sure we all know the rose, thorn, and bud debrief. If you don't know that, it's quick to do and it's fun. A lot of times we'll just do it in the car ride home from a hike. So what was the best part of the hike? What was something you didn't like about the hike? What's the bud is what's something you're looking forward to. And it is really fun to hear, because a lot of times what you think was the best is not what they say, and the thorn, and sometimes the bud will surprise you. Like I'm usually like, oh, going home and laying on the couch and watching TV. But a lot of times their bud will be like, I can't wait to come explore this area again. I mean, that's not to say that laying on the couch isn't a bud often. Watercolors, that's what we were doing in that last picture. That's also a great item to bring on the trail, right? Just to take, watercolors are awesome on the trail because they're super easy to do. And especially if you're down by a creek and you can just fill up with some water, paint a tree that you love or whatever it might be. Then also making memory anchors are a great way for reflection. So just kind of collecting some rocks and sticks and pine cones and maybe making a pine cone person at home, or the sun catchers, flowers that they've caught, or the leaves. Writing poems can be nice when we get back. I like to do group poems. So it's not like, oh my God, we have to write a poem. Oh. It's just like everyone just writes one line that they loved. And then depending how many people in the family, there's 4 of us. We've got 4, although we also will we'll voice our dogs. So we usually have 6 lines there. Mini photo collages, so kids, like if they're older, if they have a phone, but borrowing your phone's a big deal, and going and capturing some pictures so they can make a photo collage, and then you can title it like Mountains to Sea Trail, and then they have it up in their room. That's another way to get them excited. Mini scrapbooks, right? Especially from longer trips. Musings from the trail, so just stories, collecting stories. I always love it on the longer trips, especially if we're doing it with families and friends, at the end, we'll all just kind of share a favorite story. And it's amazing what you miss as a parent, which is lovely. And then painting the rocks. And then having them get on and talk with grandma, get on Zoom and tell like, hey, why don't we Zoom? And you can tell Mimi all about your big hike. Those are great ways to help them reflect. And in that reflection, they start building an appreciation and love for these outdoor adventures that are great. Okay. Celebrations, acknowledgments, and metrics. So this was during the pandemic. Again, this was, as you can see, oh, I didn't even notice that, the little Everglade. We do the Junior Ranger program for national parks. We love going to the national parks. And the Junior Ranger program is amazing because they have to, you get the pamphlet. Some parks it's free, some parks it's like $5. And they fill it out, but it's really informative. So they're learning quite a bit. And then when they fill it out, they go to a ranger, they check it, and then they actually get sworn in as a junior ranger. This happened to be in the Everglades National Park, but they get sworn in. And it's not fluff. Like for the Everglades, you had to do a paddle. And they're like, well, we just got back from a 7-day paddle. She's like, that counts. But it's cool. And I've got some pictures that I'll show you a little later on about it. So you can see it in more detail. So what are ways, again, this is human need, right? Like just to kind of acknowledge what they've done. And it's a way for them to see like, oh, this is fun. I go do this. And then I get a sticker from that area. And I have this board that I collected. So ways to celebrate and acknowledge and metrics of their accomplishments. The Junior Rangers are fantastic, and they have it for both state and national parks. So highly recommend that. And for the national parks, it's not like you have to be going to a bunch, right? Like my girls just chip away at it. It's not like, we hit up all the national parks in a year. Collecting stickers from where they go, and even if they went, like even if you're just hiking around here a lot, you can go to Black Dome and get a Mountains to See sticker or something like that. And then they've got a poster board, and they're collecting stickers from all the hikes or adventures that they've done. If they went paddling at the NOC, they can get an NOC sticker. One of the things that we do with our girls is collect Christmas ornaments from our adventures. And so that's like a big, like we went to Jackson Hole and did all this hiking and climbing. And then, it's like the big family decision. What ornament do we get that represents our Jackson Hole experience? And then it's super cool because at Christmas time, as we take out each ornament, we're remembering the story of that particular adventure. Oh, here's a canoe from when we went canoeing in Lake Placid, and that was so beautiful. And it just happens to be that all our trips are around outdoor adventures. So then our whole Christmas tree is full of these ornaments that represent these outdoor adventures, and the stories come alive in December. And then another one are hiking logbooks. I don't know if you've seen those. I've got some examples that I'll show you, but those are really great to get your kids on, and they can have fun with it, but I'll show you the picture of it, but they're just a great way to keep track of the trails that they've done. And again, another metric because they fill and fill and fill. And then eventually they're like, I filled this logbook with all these hikes that I've done. And then the maps with pins. So it can be anything from you just get a map of the Appalachian Trail and then whatever section they're doing. You can get it with the national parks. Guidebooks are great, right? So if you have guidebooks, you can be like, why don't you pick out a hike that you want to do? We want to do like a 10-mile hike this weekend. Look through the guidebook and then getting them excited about some goal they might have and creating a bucket list. So for example, 25 waterfalls in 1 year, which you can easily do in our gorgeous Western North Carolina. But, something like that they create a list and they're getting excited about and checking it off. So because I'm a visual learner, I do have some pictures for you so you can see it. So this is an example of the National Park Junior Ranger. So this person is, look at that, Abraham's birthplace. Right, so then your kids can collect they're cool too. They're wood. They're really nice. And then you can get things like this if you want. And every time they hit a national park, they put this is in progress. This is a person that's gone to all the national parks. I believe this might be a visual for selling, because that's pretty impressive. This is more of, National Mark and Marie's National Park Adventures. Etsy people, you can find all this stuff on Etsy and they personalize it. It's my plug for Etsy. I don't work for them. I get no affiliate. Just supporting our artists out there. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I'm curious to count how many I've been to. And again, so kids will love this. Like they hang it in their room. And now suddenly it's like, what do you want to do for a family vacation? Let's go to a national park. And you're like, what? That's awesome. Let's do it. Let's go to a national park. So this is an example of a page from that hiking logbook I was telling you. And it's also pretty cool if you're also wanting to like create very skilled wilderness folks. As you can see, it's self-explanatory. But it's just like the trail conditions and then the duration, elevation. And that's, this is the stuff too, where like maths every day. So you can get them looking at the map and figuring out, okay, if we do this hike, what's our elevation gain? Do we want to do the hike based on the elevation gain? It's a little blurry, but that's another map with the national parks. All those little pine cones are the national parks. Look, I'm a big fan of the national parks. Europe has their cathedrals. We've got our national parks. It's what we did. And then these are long distance. So this is a map of long distance trails. So if you like, when we were in Grayson Highlands and we ran into folks, really no families, but a lot of couples that are like hiking the Appalachian Trail bit by bit over 10 years. But it's kind of cool just to have this stuff hanging in your kids' room too, because it gets them really excited about it and to look at all these trails that are out there. Okay, this is coming to the conclusion part and then the question part. So, love this quote, and it's super fun when we're looking at planning these outdoor adventures for our kids to look at kind of all of these nuts and bolts. But for me, one of the many reasons I love to do it is this piece right here, is confidence is only born out of one thing, demonstrated ability. It is not born of anything else. It cannot dream up confidence. You cannot wish it. You have to accomplish it, right? And so every time we get our kid out there and they're like, I can't hike up there. This is the worst. And let me tell you, even if you follow all these things I've put out there, there's a high probability you're still going to have a meltdown on the trail. And yay, mom and dad, that's awesome if your kiddo's melting down on the trail, right? Because you're going to let them have their emotions. You're going to encourage them. They're going to get to the top of Sam's Knob, and they're going to build confidence. Because you don't build it by watching TV and playing the video games and doing all that. You do it by being out there. And this is the prime example for our girls. We've been doing outdoor stuff, and then we went into this trip in the Everglades, and we paddled from Everglades City out to the Barrier Islands. And it was pretty big, and the sun was coming down, and we still had to go around a point. And you can see, like, we were trying to camp on that side. But they just loved it, and they ate it up. And I was like, okay, because it's getting kind of dark, and the waves are getting a little big, and the wind's picking up, but this is great. You love it. And I think it just goes back to that confidence, and that confidence plays into everything. This is the kind of confidence where they're like, yeah, I'm going to try out for the Asheville Youth Symphony. I got this. And you're like, you do. Yeah, I mean, I did this trip in the pouring down rain, or I did this, or I did that. And so here's an example of building confidence in our kiddos when they're little. So, wow, I'm really stuck on Sam's Knob. Sam's Knob I love it because it's like such a quick hike. I think it's like 3 miles at the most round trip with such a gorgeous view. So this was like, we stopped here, and this is what you want to do too, is like really just don't like hike. Like we stopped and had lunch here, and we're like, you're going to hike to that Sam's Knob. For all the people that haven't been hearing me talk about Sam's Knob. But we're like, we're going to hike to the top of that. And here are these little 3-year-old Zoe and Quinn like, wow. And as you can see, we were ready to carry them, but we're like, you got this whenever you need support. And off they went, and they hiked all the way up to the top of Sam's Knob. And here they are with the summit picture with their dog. And they weren't even phased. They lost a layer, right, as we do when we're hiking. Took that off. But this is, right, so taking time, and then when we came back down, we're like, look at that. You guys, turn around and check out what you hiked to. Like really taking the time to acknowledge that for them. And then I'm going to play this video because not only do these outdoor adventures we plan for our kids build their confidence, but to me, building resilience and what's a really popular term right now, that frustration tolerance, is so important. Every time our kid goes through something hard out there in the outdoors, I like to think of the outdoors as a third parent, right? Like sometimes when it's dumping with rain, I'm like, okay, all right, third parent, I see you. I see you dumping with rain and making my kids stronger. Might not like it at the moment, but I see you. And so this was one of those moments. And this is, I think they were like 7 here.
Quinny, tell me about it. Sit around, I'd like to meet you. What's going on this morning?
So this is an example, and Quinn's still like this at 13 with her outdoor adventures. But this is little Quinn. She was 5, but she's been camping for a long time. And so it also helped that this was the last day of a 5-day trip that was dumping with rain. But that is what I wish for you and your families and your kiddos, are these great outdoor adventures. And remember, it's okay if there's moments where it's hard and they're not liking it, because you're building that resiliency. But if you utilize a lot of these things we talked about, you're going to get that both, where they're going to enjoy it and they're going to build that resiliency. And that's what we do in our program called TAASC, which stands for the American Adventure Service Corps. It's a youth-based nonprofit wilderness leadership here in Asheville, and the kids do an hour-and-a-half meeting a week, and then each quarter they do 2 trips, and then in the summer we culminate with the younger kids do 5 days, and then the older kids do 2 to 3 weeks, and we usually get them out west, Sierras, Yosemite, and it's really great to see the growth. We start at age 6 for the girls and at age 8 for the boys. So if you are interested in that, you can go to our website, which is Asheville TAASC, TAASC.com. But yeah, just want to wish you all a ton of fabulous adventures with your kids. And we have about 5 minutes if anyone has any questions.
Sure. So we have some online viewers.
Okay, yeah.
You've been getting thumbs up.
Yay.
Good. So probably did repeat the question because you had a lot like that. So if you have, so a lot of parents were overwhelmed during the pandemic. It was harder to plan trips like this during that time. So now they're trying to jumpstart it again. The kids are older. They got used to being on screens because everything was on screens. How do you get them back into the woods?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I think there's two approaches. So one is, we know that age group is the question is, I just wanted to jump in on the answer. So the question is that during the pandemic, we were just in survival mode and we were just trying to get through it. And now that we are on this other side of it, parents are wanting to get back into outdoor adventures with our kids, and our kids are older and they kind of spent the time in the pandemic plugged in. And so how, especially with our older kids, can we get them back out doing outdoor adventures? Yeah. And especially for our teens and our older kids, knowing that their most important need is social, especially peer. If you can find ways to wrap in their peers, even if it's another family, that you could say, hey, what if we went and did this trip, especially if you can camp somewhere where there's no cell reception. That's the best thing to do. Fortunately, the cell reception is getting so good. But I would say the first thing is really helping them connect on outdoor adventures with a social component to it. So like if they're open to it, our program's great for that because we have a whole teen program. So there's 20 teenagers and they're all like, my husband right now is circumnavigating the Linville Gorge. They're doing that in 3 days and then they're going to climb for 3 days in the gorge. And that's with a whole teen group. So that's great. The other thing is letting beyond the social capital piece is letting your kiddos know this is a family value for us and this is really important. So that's a non-negotiable. What we do is totally open for discussion, but it needs to be something that is outdoors, unplugged. And that can kind of help where we've drawn that boundary that's really important to us, but we're flexible on what that looks like. And that helps meet the teen and their need for control and autonomy.
So you mentioned unplugged. How do you make that negotiation?
The question was, I mentioned unplugged. So how do you negotiate that? And the best way to negotiate that is specifically go to a place where there's no reception. That's the best way. And up in the Grayson Highlands, we had 2 days where there was no reception. It's difficult, right? Because they're going to pull the whole, well, it's my camera and I want to take really cool pictures. That's a tough one. You can put it out as a challenge. Like this is a challenge. We want to own the phone. We don't want the phone to own us. And if you really believe, like if you're telling me that you own the phone and the phone doesn't owe you, then let's put that to the test with a 3-day weekend where we leave it behind. It gets tricky because you're going to want your phone, especially for safety reasons. So that will probably be brought up. Teens usually like to bring that up. They're really into the whole like fair thing. Well, then you leave your phone. And then at which point you can say, okay, I'm happy to leave my phone if we can find another way to be safe. Like we use in Garmin Reach. That's what we use. Satellites are too expensive, but we still need a way, obviously, with what we do to contact people in an emergency that we don't have reception. But I don't think the average family is going to get in Garmin Reach.
Phone stays off.
Yeah, it's just off and then you use it and it's a text system. And so whoever you've left word with is on point to be checking texts. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a real tough one, right? Because they're so plugged in and there's so many things going on with that. I would say in that situation, what's often happening as we know, the teen brain has a dip in dopamine, and that's left over from cave time. Because in order for them to want to leave the cave and enter dangerous areas, they needed a dip in dopamine so that they would want to seek out risk. And we don't live in cave time, but our brain is still wired for it. So our teens have a dip in dopamine, which makes them more susceptible to addictions. And everyone that creates video games and all the pinging knows that, right? And so they do it to the T to get that dopamine addiction. So maybe your trip involves an activity that's a big dopamine hit. So maybe you're like, well, we're going to go camp out near Bryson City and then we're going to paddle at Nantahala. Or we're going to go do this and then we're rappelling attic window. Something that will give them a big dopamine hit. So they're getting that from a wilderness activity instead of being plugged in. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So parents who have gone on hikes and camping trips but have not been outward bound instructors and don't have, like, I don't know how to read a map and a compass. My husband kind of does that. I don't. What would you recommend to a parent who wants to know these things? Task for parents.
Task for parents. People suggest it. So the question was, parents that go out and hike and love the outdoors, but aren't necessarily outward bound instructors and can't, be, this is how you use a compass and read a topo map. What can they do? And yeah, that is, maybe we should do task for parents. Oh, that's a good idea. I'm amazed at people that love the outdoors, how they're also really good at doing videos. It's insane how many videos are out there. Yeah, on everything. Like, this is the best stove, and this is how you like hijack it so you don't have to keep using fuel canisters. So there would be videos out there on YouTube. And sometimes they used to do it. Everything's changed pandemic, but pre-pandemic REI would have free community classes. So you could check your local REI and see what classes they have there. Yeah. Or find a friend and say, hey, can I buy you dinner? And you teach me compass and topo maps. Mm-hmm.
Last time I was doing a lot of backpacking over in the 20s.
Yeah.
And so the idea of backpacking and carrying enough stuff for us adults and child not yet old enough to carry their backpack, and then sleeping on minimal cushion.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage that for yourself in terms of not overpacking, being able to get a good night's sleep?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
So the question was, if we're no longer in our 20s, even though we look it, how do we manage carrying the gear for our kiddo and having a good night? And we're so focused on making it enjoyable for our kids. How do we also make it enjoyable for ourselves? And I would say, holy cow, the gear industry is insane what they have come up with. So you can now get like sleeping pads this thick, so comfortable, that fold up like this. I'm not kidding, right, gear industry people? It's amazing. So upping your gear. It's a good one, especially right, because if we were doing it in our 20s, what I still have is like the self-inflating thermarest that weighs forever. Yeah, it's huge. And I mean, I did up my gear, and on this last trip, no lie, like my sleeping pad was like this, and it got to the point where I was like, we can put a tent anywhere because I'm not going to feel a rock. Yeah. So looking at gear, and gear's also gotten a lot lighter. So I would check out gear. Some places might even rent it. REI always has really great sales. So you could watch those. And even Black Dome does. A little shout out to the locals. Trying to think. And a lot of that gear has become very affordable too. So hit up your Amazon Prime. I'm sure they got some sleeping pads. Got a few hours left.
Or the frugal backpacker.
Frugal backpacker, and borrow. And if you can borrow from friends and say, hey, can I, try some gear and try it out. But I think you'd be surprised on how light you can go these days. Like, I just got a new backpack, and I was like, oh my God, my Dana pack that served me well for all those years, it's like 5 times as much as my new backpack weighs. So you'd be surprised. And then also, even little kiddos can carry stuff. Mm-hmm. Things that are heavy, like water and food, you can give them a little bit of that. And then hiking poles. Highly recommend hiking poles. It turns you from two-wheel to 4-wheel, and you can take a lot more weight, especially going up and down. Yeah.
One more question?
Yeah.
What adventure books did you read to your kids?
Oh, that's awesome. So there's a book. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but is it Voices of Giants? It's basically stories. I like reading things that are just 3 pages in a one person's story. And this is a compilation of female voices from the Yosemite climbing scene. And so we could just read a little bit about it. And so they were getting immersed into the whole climbing scene, in particular from the female perspective, because climbing is so much better now. But 30 years ago when I started, like, to see like my friend and I would go, we spent a couple months in Joshua Tree climbing, and people were like, 2 women? Like, where's the men? And I'm like, we don't have any. We know how to lead climb. 2 women know how to lead climb. I know, it's crazy. So I read them that. I did read them How to Build a Fire, Jack London. They liked that one. would read Robert Service. Has great, yeah, what is the one about strange things toil in the land of the midnight sun? The Cremation of Sam McGee. So he has a lot of good poems. His book's huge, so you can just copy it. Those were some good ones. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Yay.
Thanks to everybody who's watching online. And we're good. Okay. Boom.